Not long ago, there was a rather odd incident involving my cousin. It all began when she somehow concluded that due to my future father-in-law's wealth, I should provide her with a lavish car for her wedding day. This wasn't just any luxury vehicle. She anticipated something more extravagant than the one I had rented for my sister's wedding. When I refused, both she and my aunt were furious. Their anger wasn't mild. They became extremely upset, hurling insults at me, my fiancé, and my family. I found their reaction quite amusing. Instead of being upset, I shared this absurd story with my other sisters and some cousins. During our conversation, my sisters and cousins disclosed various inappropriate or downright terrible behaviors my cousin had shown over the years. This revealed a pattern of entitlement and drama. Believing it was crucial for more family members to be aware of her behavior, I decided to involve my uncle, her father. After our discussion, he felt it necessary to inform his future son-in-law about the luxury car incident and possibly other concerning behaviors of my cousin. I'm not privy to all the details of what was discussed, but the outcome was quite dramatic. The wedding was abruptly put on indefinite hold. This brings us to the more recent developments. I recently proposed to my partner, and we got engaged. Naturally, we began to share the exciting news with our family members. However, when my aunt and cousin caught wind of our engagement, the reaction was explosive. My cousin actually called me up, screaming at such a volume that I could hear her ranting even though I wasn't holding the phone to my ear. She accused me of trying to steal her spotlight and claimed that my getting engaged first was a deliberate attempt to ruin her life. But it didn't stop there. Shortly after that heated call, I received an email from my aunt. The email was beyond belief. It demanded that I end my engagement until after my cousin had her chance to marry, suggesting that it was utterly distasteful for me to proceed with my life events during such a tumultuous time for my cousin. According to them, my engagement was adding to her emotional distress. It was clear that my cousin agreed wholeheartedly with this idea, as if postponing my happiness was the natural course of action. Faced with such absurd demands, I could have reacted with anger or frustration. However, the sheer audacity of their demands was so outrageous that it actually struck me as hilarious. Instead of complying or arguing, I firmly told them to back off or, in my more colorful choice of words, to pound sand. Despite the tension, you have to marvel at the sheer nerve of some people. Almost to the point of amusement, I continued with my engagement plans, undeterred by their ludicrous requests. To recap for people who haven't read my previous posts, this cousin demanded I rent an expensive car for her to use at her wedding, demanded I end my engagement after hers was postponed, told my family I had postponed my engagement in order to try and pressure me into going along with it. Those are just the highlights. There is more that she's done, but we would be here forever. My cousin's engagement went from being called off to having the entire relationship end due to her crappy behavior, and she's gone completely off the rails. She has found out that not only are my fiancé and I planning on getting married in late September, but we are planning on buying a house in the next 6 to 12 months, assuming we can find the time to do so, obviously, and that not long after that we want to start trying for kids. Ladies and gentlemen, she ducking lost the plot. She called my fiancé, screaming at her about how we are ruining her life deliberately and that we are so cruel for rubbing our happiness in her face. My fiancé gave me the phone, and she shifted her attacks, accusing me of stealing her life and that I was only doing all this because she wasn't able to. I may have been a bit of a jerk here, but I simply laughed and told her that I've never even considered her when planning my life. I hung up, and we've blocked her, though she does still have our numbers, obviously. Honestly, she's a complete lunatic. While I do feel slightly bad for her, everything that's happened has been because of her own choices. Even her own father has turned around and said she needs to accept what her actions have cost. So there we go. I know people were interested in the last story, so I thought I'd share this here for you. Update. I now have an update and a small explanation for her past behavior. My cousin has taken a job in another state and moved away and is currently only speaking to her mom. She is ignoring her dad and sister, aside from the rare one-word response, so they know she's actually alive and hasn't responded to anyone else in the family at all. Talking to her sister, I have also found out why she may have done this. A bit of background. There are 9 grandkids in my family. I'm the oldest, and until my youngest cousin was born 8 years after me, I was the only grandson. The second grandchild, not the cousin from the story, was literally the first girl born into the family for 6 generations. The cousin from the story is grandchild number 5, and she has one younger sister. My cousin has apparently always felt overshadowed by my eldest cousin and me. Everything she did, we had already done. Being 4 years older, she also had a younger sister who was brilliant and would almost always outperform her when it was her time to do something. It led to this mindset of always feeling that we had done things better and earlier, and it made her accomplishments less meaningful. This all started to get worse because she and my sister got engaged around the same time, but my sister announced hers first, so she got the first engagement of our generation. Then the date my sister chose meant my cousin couldn't pick an earlier date without it being clear she was either deliberately trying to get married before my sister and likely not having enough time to plan it properly, so she was forced to choose April of this year and settle for being second. Obviously, that was canceled, which made everything worse, especially because I was in her eyes deliberately trying to ruin it by not helping her engagement, and eventually, the relationship itself ended quite badly, and I went on to get engaged myself, which was the final straw, apparently. While this in no way excuses her, especially because she's done a lot of awful things to non-family members, but I do feel bad for her. I never realized she felt that, and I hope she can find some peace away from everything. Oh, she got hit by the middle child syndrome hard. Hopefully, someday she will learn to stop comparing herself to others and start comparing herself with her past self. Life isn't a competition, and it's made so much more worthwhile when you can see how much you've progressed as a person over time. She sounds so unhappy right now. May she find peace and happiness. Story 2. I landed my current job when I was just 19 years old, which was a pretty big deal because it helped me pay my way through college. The job came with some fantastic benefits too, which was a huge plus. Over the years, I've grown super close to my coworkers. They're more than just people I work with. They really feel like family to me. Now, talking about my actual family would take us down a whole different path, and honestly, they're not the best. So let's save that for another chat. Fast forward a few years, I found out I was pregnant. This was big news, and when I shared it at work, almost everyone was thrilled for me. I say almost because there was one person, let's call her Patty, not her real name, who didn't seem to care much at first. Patty was one of those coworkers who kept to herself a lot, so I didn't think much of her lack of reaction initially. However, as time went on, Patty started to warm up to me. She began asking how I was feeling, what the doctor said, how my baby was doing, and what my plans were after the baby arrived. It felt nice to have her take an interest, especially considering how she had reacted, or not reacted, when I first told everyone. One day, I mentioned to Patty that my boyfriend and I had decided to get married. We wanted to live together and raise our child as a family. For some reason, this seemed to bother Patty. After that conversation, she started bringing up the topic of adoption. She asked me several times if I had ever considered giving my baby up for adoption. I was pretty clear with her that it was not something I was thinking about. I wanted to keep my baby and raise him or her with my soon-to-be husband. Patty didn't take that well. After our talk about adoption, she stopped talking to me completely. Things took a strange turn one evening after work hours. A couple who looked to be in their 40s came to my workplace. They seemed confused about the visiting hours and insisted they were there to see me. I explained that they were mistaken and that visiting hours were over. That's when the woman excitedly told me they were there to meet me and thank me for choosing them to adopt my baby. I was completely taken aback. I had no idea who these people were or what they were talking about. It got weirder when the woman tried to touch my 6 months pregnant belly. I reacted instinctively and screamed. The scream was so loud that it attracted the attention of all the nurses and security personnel nearby. They came running to see what the commotion was about. The couple tried to explain to me and the security staff that they had been told by their sister-in-law that I was a young, unwed mother desperate to give up my baby for adoption and that I had chosen them as the adoptive parents. They shared that they had been struggling with infertility and were led to believe that adopting my baby was a done deal. I immediately told them there had been a huge misunderstanding. I had no intention of giving up my baby, and I didn't even know their sister-in-law. You'd think that would be the end of it, but the very next night, things escalated. Patty came up to my desk, fuming with anger. She screamed at me, accusing me of treating her brother and sister-in-law terribly. After all she had done to help me correct my mistake, it was then I realized Patty had somehow gotten it into her head, or perhaps misrepresented to her family that I was planning to give up my baby for adoption. This was completely untrue. I called security again, and this time I made sure that Patty, her brother, and his wife were officially banned from coming near me or contacting me at work. Now I'm 8 months pregnant, and honestly, I'm scared. The whole incident has left me feeling vulnerable and worried that these people who seem to feel entitled to my baby might try something when I'm at the hospital giving birth. My boyfriend tries to reassure me, saying it's just the hormones making me worry and that legally they can't just take our baby. While he might be right, the fear and stress of the situation are real. It's been a tough situation to navigate, especially at a time when I should be focusing on the joy of welcoming a new life into the world. The idea that someone could so grossly misunderstand or misrepresent my intentions is unsettling. Moreover, the confrontation and the entitlement of the couple fueled by Patty's false claims have added an unnecessary layer of stress. All this has made me more cautious about whom I trust and what I share at work. It's also been a wake-up call about how quickly things can spiral out of control based on misunderstandings or misinformation as my due date approaches. I'm trying to stay positive and prepare for the arrival of my baby, hoping that the steps I've taken will ensure our safety and peace during this special time. Now for the comment. Did Patty get fired? Because there's no way a person like that should be working at a hospital. I understand that you're scared. Anyone would be. Talk to your doctor and make sure that all of your information will be password protected. All of the nurses working with you should know everything is password protected as well. This isn't an uncommon request, so they should be able to accommodate you. If you're still not comfortable, have your baby at a completely different hospital. What matters the most right now is how you feel, your safety, and the safety of your baby. Also, talk to your supervisor in HR to see if there is a plan in place to keep Patty from knowing when you take your maternity leave. Call a lawyer and ask if you can get at least a temporary restraining order, if not a permanent one. They usually do consultations. Story 3. My girlfriend's parents are extremely rich, and I'm not just talking about a little rich. Her dad is insanely wealthy, with hundreds of millions of pounds to his name. Now here's the story. My sister got married last year, and she wanted to make sure my girlfriend's parents felt welcome at her wedding. They've been to our family events a few times before, and since my girlfriend and I are pretty serious about each other, we thought it would be nice to start treating her parents like they were part of our family too. Unfortunately, they couldn't make it to the wedding, but they appreciated being invited and wanted to do something special for the couple. So, as a wedding present, they did something super generous. They hired a luxurious Jaguar car as a gift. My sister and her husband were absolutely thrilled. They drove around in that fancy car feeling like celebrities, and it made their special day even more memorable. Fast forward to last night. Out of the blue, I received a text from my cousin saying she needed to talk and was on her way over to my place. She's also planning her wedding, which is happening next year, and she had some big ideas she wanted to discuss. When she arrived, she got straight to the point. She told me she wanted a Lamborghini or Ferrari as her wedding car. I was taken aback by her request. You see, while it's true that my girlfriend's parents are wealthy, my girlfriend and I are not living in luxury. We're pretty average financially. We don't have the kind of money to just rent super expensive cars, and we like to keep things simple and independent. We don't want to constantly lean on her parents for financial support. The luxurious items we do have were gifts, which we receive only on rare occasions because we've made it clear we want to manage on our own as much as possible. I explained all of this to my cousin, hoping she would understand our situation. She seemed a bit disappointed, but then said she would settle for the same type of Jaguar car that my sister had at her wedding. That's when I had to clarify that it wasn't me who had arranged for that car. It was a gift from my girlfriend's parents. That's when her attitude suddenly changed. She remembered how rich my girlfriend's parents were, and her face lit up with excitement. She thought she'd hit the jackpot and could still get a super fancy car for her wedding after all. I have to admit I was pretty annoyed. I felt like she was only thinking about herself and not considering how inappropriate it was to assume she'd get the same treatment as my sister. I decided to be upfront with her. I told her that not only do my girlfriend's parents not really know her, but my girlfriend isn't a fan of hers either, and to be honest, I don't really like her much either. We weren't planning to go to her wedding, which we hadn't even received a save the date for. That's when the conversation turned sour. She was furious with me for being so blunt. Since that conversation, my phone has been blowing up with messages. My aunt, her mother, has been sending me angry texts. She's been calling me selfish and accusing me of ruining her daughter's big day. It's been pretty intense. But then I've also received some messages from my uncle and another cousin. They're apologizing for her behavior and telling me they understand where I'm coming from and that they appreciate my honesty. Honestly, this whole situation has made me realize how complicated and stressful family dynamics can be, especially when it comes to weddings and expectations. It's tough when people have different ideas about what's appropriate and what's not, and it can lead to a lot of misunderstandings and hurt feelings. For now, I'm trying to keep my cool and not let the drama get to me too much. I care about my family, but I also believe it's important to stand up for what's right and maintain healthy boundaries. Sometimes that means having tough conversations and dealing with the fallout, but it's all part of learning how to navigate relationships and family life. So, while my cousin might be upset and my aunt might think I'm the bad guy right now, I'm just focusing on keeping things honest and straightforward. Life's too short to get caught up in unnecessary drama, and I believe that as long as I'm truthful and kind, things will eventually work themselves out. Now for the comment. You should send her a toy car as a wedding present. Better send her a Ferrari toy car so she can't say you're cheap. Story 4. This happened to a friend of mine, Jane. Jane and her younger sister, Tina, had always had a bit of a competitive streak between them growing up. Tina seemed to carry that typical younger sibling chip on her shoulder, always striving to match or surpass her older sister in everything they did, whether it was grades, sports, or just getting attention from their parents. Tina was always in a silent battle with Jane. Fast forward a few years, both Jane and Tina were married and starting their own families. As luck would have it, both sisters found themselves pregnant at the same time, with Tina due a few months before Jane. This new phase of life, however, didn't seem to slow down the sibling rivalry. If anything, it only added a new arena for competition. Jane and her husband, Mike, were thrilled about the pregnancy but also wary. They knew that Tina, given her past behavior, might try to one-up Jane in any way possible during this special time. It was a pattern they had observed too often not to be cautious. One evening over dinner at their parents' house, the topic of baby names came up. Tina, who was visibly showing more than Jane, seemed unusually interested in whether Jane had picked out names yet. Oddly enough, Tina herself claimed to be drawing a blank on names, which immediately raised red flags for Jane. Over the years, Jane had learned to read her sister like a book, and something about Tina's overly casual inquiries didn't sit right. Recalling a family story, Jane and Mike had a heartwarming plan to name their child after a cousin who had tragically died in his teens. This cousin had been a beloved figure in Jane's life, and naming her child after him felt like a profound way to honor his memory. Sensing that Tina might somehow try to snag the name if she learned about it, Jane was very cautious about sharing this information. In the weeks that followed, whenever baby names came up, Jane would suggest various random names to see Tina's reaction. Each time, Tina's response was predictable, probing if Jane was considering that particular name seriously. Finally, Tina couldn't hold back her curiosity and outright asked Jane what name she was planning on using. Jane, sticking to her instincts, feigned ignorance and claimed she was still undecided. Jane and Mike realized they needed a strategy to protect their chosen name. They came up with a clever plan to throw Tina off the scent. At the next family gathering, Jane casually mentioned that they had settled on a name, dropping hints about a fictitious family legacy tied to the Civil War. She invented a story about their great-great-grandfather who had supposedly died at Gettysburg, a story bolstered by their father's interest in Civil War history and the family's proximity to the historic site. Tina took the bait. She expressed how much she loved the historic name and, without much surprise, announced soon after that she had decided on that name for her son, claiming it was too good not to use. Jane and Mike kept their composure, offering congratulations and pretending to be pleased. Months later, when Tina's son was born, she proudly named him after the non-existent Civil War ancestor. Jane and Mike attended the baby shower and the naming ceremony, all the while keeping their secret. Finally, it was time for Jane's baby boy to arrive. When he was born, they named him after their cousin. The family was deeply touched by the gesture, remembering the young cousin fondly. The name had significant emotional weight, and its revelation brought many family members to tears. After the birth, with Tina smugly tried to apologize to Jane for stealing her first choice, Mike couldn't help but reveal the truth. He laughed and explained that the whole story about their Civil War ancestor was a fabrication, a joke. He shared that their family hadn't even been in America during the Civil War. They had immigrated from Ireland in the 1920s. The realization that she had been duped left Tina embarrassed, but without much she could do. Tina, perhaps learning a valuable lesson, decided to keep the name for her son regardless. She tried to spin the situation by telling others that it was the name they had always wanted. Jane noticed, however, that Tina never again asked about potential baby names in the future. It seemed the incident had left a mark on her usual tactics. To add a layer of humor to the ongoing family dynamics, whenever Tina began to act superior or boastful at family gatherings, Mike would make a playful comment about their great-great-grandpa or suggest a family trip to visit his non-existent grave at Gettysburg. These remarks served as light-hearted reminders of the clever ruse, often bringing a chuckle to those in the know. As years went by, this story became a favorite anecdote at family reunions, often retold with laughter and good spirits. It was a tale of sibling rivalry, clever deception, and ultimately a reminder of the strong bonds that held the family together despite the occasional mischief. Jane's clever handling of the situation with Tina not only protected a deeply personal family tribute, but also taught a memorable lesson in humility and caution. It was a story that would be passed down through generations, always bringing smiles and a few shakes of the head at the clever lengths to which Jane and Mike had gone to outsmart a tricky situation. Now for the comment. Sounds like she was using her baby as an excuse to crash at your place for as long as possible. Story 5. So, some backstory. I only had one parent in my life, as my father was an aggressive father. Within the first 6 weeks of my life, my mother gained focus. Daddy and my father had extremely supervised visits, like a social worker had to watch me with him. So, like a daycare lady, he never made an appointment to see me. My mother told me what happened when she deemed ready. So, about 15, 16 when I turned 20, a lady who wasn't more than 3 years older than me contacts me. I mistook her as a person I'd seen in school. I couldn't be more wrong. Shortly after, I found out she was engaged to my father and had a son with my father. Big age difference. She was 23, my father 57. I got into contact with my father. I never met him as he lived in New Hampshire while I live in Iowa. We never got close. A month later, my father passed. I don't know how. Shortly, his fiancée, I'll call her stepmom, even though she hasn't really, don't want to waste a bunch of words, lost custody of my half-brother and put him up for adoption due to day overdose. I was asked if I would adopt him as he was my half-brother. I declined because I didn't have the space or money at the time. Around this time, I met my now husband. I am 25, my husband 26. I had just given birth to our daughter 3 weeks ago. Now, there's 4 people at the house. My mother, 56, husband, our new baby, and I. My mother is with us due to pandemic. She's high risk, plus she wants to be around to help with my daughter. When my daughter was 2 weeks old, I posted some photos of me, my husband, my mother, and our daughter together. It took us some time with the photos, but we figured it out. I posted them on Facebook. About an hour later, I get a comment from Mom to check my messages. I check, and here is what they basically said. Hey, Opie, I'm going to be coming over tomorrow to see my granddaughter. I'm so excited to meet her. I'll stay in the guest room. I should note she still lives in New Hampshire, and I still live in Iowa. I text back, sorry, can't. My baby and my mother are high risk, and I'm still learning a routine with my daughter. My mother is also using the guest bedroom. I didn't get a response after this. Next morning, there's a knock at the door. I thought it could be a package I ordered, so I go answer it. When I open, I was pissed. Hey, OP, I'm here to see my granddaughter. My stepmom tries to open the door, but I pushed back. I told you, you couldn't come. There isn't room for you, and there are high-risk people here. Please leave. But I have a right to see my grandbaby. Your father would want me to meet her. I'm her family. She tries to give me puppy eyes. Stepmom, not really wanting to deal with this right now, leave. I shut the door. All seems well until yesterday. She came over again, and this time, since I was busy with the baby, my husband handled her and threatened her with calling the police. She leaves after throwing a fit. Last night, when my baby is asleep, I got a text from her. "Why didn't you let me see my granddaughter? I'm her grandma. I came all this way to see her, and you deny me seeing her. I just wanted to hold her. Your father would have wanted me to see her." I had responded to this stepmom, "You're not my child's grandma. Only my mother and my husband's mother is his grandma. You weren't married to my father, only engaged. I don't trust you with her either, as I have no clue if you're still doing D or recovering. I don't trust you either, as you lost custody of my half-brother. I don't care what my father would want, as he was barely in my life, 3 months max in my life if you include when I was born. Pandemic is a thing right now, and I have multiple people who are high risk. I told you you couldn't come over, but you did anyway." I shut off my phone after this to get the little sleep I can get. Sometime this morning, after I rocked and fed my daughter, I got a text from stepmom asking for money at the hotel she stayed at. I hit decline, and she sends it again, saying I owe her since she couldn't stay at my place. I declined again and blocked her. I don't know if she's going to show up again, but if she does, my husband will call the police. Now for the comment. Sounds like she was using her baby as an excuse to crash at your place for as long as possible.